It was in early November of 1997 that a series of very strange sessions led a child psychiatrist in Maine to contact the authorities. It began when a patient of his began to tell him about one of his friends. This friend being imaginary as far as both the psychiatrist and the boy's parents were concerned. He called his friend Mr.Smiles and would talk about him in great length during some sessions. The boy called him Mr.Smiles both because he would always be smiling and because when he was around, the boy said everything felt happy. He said that there was a feeling of everything being okay. The boy in question was treated for serious issues to do with anger and depression. But when Mr. Smiles was around, he said all the anger and sadness seemed to just disappear. He said that Mr. Smiles wouldn't speak but rather just stand there. At the foot of his bed, he smelled like candy floss, and just by being there, made the boy feel calm and safe. The psychiatrist assumed that the imaginary friend was some sort of coping mechanism the boy had developed to deal with his problems at home. That had led to his violent temper, and thought nothing much of it, until another patient, a girl about 9 years old, began talking about her imaginary friend, Mr. Smiles, and then a boy of 7, and then a boy of 12, and then a girl of 11. All in close to 15, separate patients all began to talk about him, about Mr. Smiles. The first few he put down to coincidence. After all, many children have imaginary friends and just name their deceptions Mr. Smile. Just generic enough that it didn't concern him too much at first. But as more and more of his patients told him about Mr. Smile, he began to grow concerned. He asked for more details. Every single one of them described him the same way, using the exact same words. Now there was no way that all these children could be in contact with each other. 5 of them, for instance, were currently being homeschooled, and according to their parents, when he spoke to them, never really even left the house, except when it was to accompany them on shopping trips, and the like. There was no way that every single one of these kids could have rehearsed and prepared their statements together, which led him to deeply disturbing conclusions. He spoke privately with each of the children's parents. One at a time, he'd avoid disclosing too much information, but told them that something troubling had cropped up in the multiple sessions with various patients, and that he believed that there was a chance the child was at risk. He asked for their permission to discuss matters with the authorities, and the parents gave them their consent, provided that they were kept in the loop as to what was going on. And so, over the course of the next week, the police came and talked to the children about their friend. They asked for details about his appearance, which they couldn't seem to describe apart from the smile, and that he was not like them. How he got into their house, anything he said or did while he was there, because by this point the psychiatrist, the parents, and the police were all convinced that Mr. Smile was quite real and quite dangerous. The authorities had checked to make sure that there was no known predators living in the area, which they had confirmed was not the case, but it was quite clear that whoever this Mr. Smile was a real person who had been sneaking into homes of these children at night. None of the children claimed to know how he got in there. They said they would just wake up and he'd be at the foot of their bed. Sometimes, they said, he would sing something, but not in English. It sounded like a lullaby, they said, and made them feel safe. Finally, the children were asked to draw Mr. Smile, as they couldn't put into words how he looked. Each and every single one of the children picked up a red crayon and proceeded to color in the entire page until it was just a red rectangle. When asked about this, they insisted that they had drawn Mr. Smile. When asked where his head, arms, and legs were, they would insist that they had drawn those and claim that they had drawn a perfect picture of the man at the foot of their bed. And when they were told that they were simply coloring in a page and not drawing anything at all, they became deeply angry, feeling that they had been accused of lying and insisting that what they had drawn was a picture of the man they had seen. Acting more on a hunch than anything else, the psychiatrist decided to show them one of the colored in rectangles to various children and asked them what it was, each and every one of them with no knowledge of what the picture was supposed to be or had drawn it, and with no knowledge that the other children that had been spoken to about the subject even existed, replied that it was a picture of Mr. Smile. Cameras and baby monitors were placed in the children's rooms so that they could be monitored. Many of the parents simply stopped sleeping altogether, staying up all night staring at the screens that displayed when their children slept. At no point did anyone enter or exit the bedrooms. No sounds except for them snoring or occasionally talking in their sleep were ever heard on the baby monitors. There was no sign of Mr. Smile. After almost 2 weeks of this, many of them began to doubt that Mr. Smile had ever existed. Other psychiatrists since have put the whole thing down to some strange shared delusion that, while it couldn't be explained yet, did not have the basis in reality. Some suggested that maybe this whole Mr. Smile thing had its basis in a TV show or a film that the children had watched, leading to them all dreaming of something similar. Then one of the boys went missing. The camera in his room had gone dead around 2 in the morning. His mother had run to check on him, only to find his room empty. It had literally taken her less than a minute to run into his room. There was no possible way for him to leave or be taken and be out of sight in the time that it took her to leave her bedroom and run towards his. But he was gone. She said that there was a smell of cotton candy in the room. The search for the boy turned up nothing. No one had seen anything strange or unusual around the home before, during, or after the appearance. And no trace of him was ever found. It was less than a week later that one of the girls who spoken to Mr. Smiles vanished as well. Then another, then another. And one by one, each of them began to disappear, until only 4 remained. The 4 remaining children began to talk about Mr. Smile and his friends were going to take them away soon. When asked about these friends, they talked about how Mr. Smile lived in the other smiling men, in the smiling place, the happy place, and that he would take them there soon. They said that there was lots of people there already, and that in Happy Place, everything was beautiful. They said they knew it because Mr. Smile talked to them about it in their heads because he couldn't talk like other people did, and that he would show them the pictures in their heads of the place that they would be going. Things began to get increasingly disturbing. After a few weeks, the children began complaining of headaches and nausea. Their schools reported that they had begun to suffer hallucinations as 2 of them started complaining that they didn't like the place that Mr. Smile was showing them anymore. One of them began screaming half an hour, acting as if they were having a fit, and screaming for the colors to stop, that the colors were horrible and they needed to go away. One of the children claimed that Mr. Smile was talking to them in their head all the time now, and was telling them things, terrible things, but they couldn't talk about it. That they mustn't, because then their parents would know about terrible things too. The psychiatrist asked them to write it down, what Mr. Smiles was saying, promising them that he wouldn't show it to no one. Managing to gain the trust of one of the boys enough that he agreed the contents of the book known to him and the authorities. But whenever anyone involved has been asked about it, they just get real quiet and quickly find an excuse to change the subject. The children stopped sleeping. Footage from their security camera showed them sitting bolt upright, their eyes unblinking, just staring at one wall without moving or making a sound. Sedatives did nothing. One of the girls began cutting strange circular marks into their skin, while 2 of the boys ceased communicating in English altogether. The language they had spoken was never identified, and despite numerous people being asked to listen to them, they could not translate what they were saying. By the start of 1999, all 4 of the children had vanished into thin air. There was no trace of who took them. Searches had turned up nothing, to this day, with no indication of where they are, or if they had ever, or if they're even dead or alive. No suspects have been ever found. All 4 of them appear to simply have vanished into thin air, much like the others, all of whom remain missing. Their disappearances unexplained.